College football playoff seeding and expansion. The highlight of the conversations down at the SEC spring meetings in Destin this week. What makes the most sense and why one head coach that you probably wouldn't think of probably has the best idea how to settle all this. All that and more is your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Vols. I'm your host, Cain. Appreciate you guys for being here, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. Couldn't do the show without you every dayers. Thank you so much for coming back. And if you're new to the show, pull up a chair. Give us a try. This is your number one spot for Tennessee football news, entertainment, weekday mornings when you wake up every single weekday morning, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you in part by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's over at FanDuel Sportsbook, safe, secure, easy-to-use app. Segments 1 and 2 of today's show is going to be dominated by conversations, the highlights of the SEC spring meeting so far at the time of this recording. College football playoff expansion, some of the different models that are being discussed, automatic qualifiers, what Greg Sankey is saying about the Big 12 and the ACC, all that and more, how that affects the SEC in-league conference slates, spring transfer portal windows, and how one head coach might have the best solution to the college football playoff seeding, and it's probably not who you would think. Plus, coming up in segment number 3, Knoxville Regional, 5 storylines that you should be mindful of heading into the weekend for Tennessee baseball in the Knoxville Regional. Okay, so again, SEC spring meetings, they've been going on since Tuesday of this week. Of course, Monday was the holiday, and at the time of this recording on Wednesday afternoon, late afternoon, here's kind of the highlights so far of the SEC spring meetings. Conversation's been dominated by, will the SEC go to 8 games or 9-game conference schedule, but that's really kind of tied into what the college football playoff expansion looks like. 16-team college football playoff expansion with 4 automatic qualifiers for the Big 10 and the SEC, 2 for the ACC and the Big 12. That's obviously on the table right now. There's other formats out there on the table right now, such as a 16-team model that would include the 5 highest-ranked conference champions and 11 at-large bids. That would be no automatic qualifiers outside of the 5 highest-ranked conference champions, which is kind of interesting because the SEC has been kind of, full force ahead, full throttle ahead. We won 4 AQs, we won 4 AQs, we won 4 AQs, Big 10 as well. And then this one from ESPN's kind of nice little pivots to a 16-team model that would include, again, the 5 highest-ranked conference champions with 11 at-large bids. This is an article from ESPN on Wednesday. This is from Greg Sankey this past week in Destin, Florida. Quote, they talked about it. I'll call it the 5+11 model and our own ability to earn those berths. At the coaching level, the question is, why wouldn't we be fine? Why wouldn't that be fine? Why wouldn't we do that? We've talked about 16 with them, so good conversation, not a destination, but the first time I've really had the ability to go really in depth with those ideas with them. End quote. Greg Sankey on discussing with the SEC head football coaches the 5+11 model. I still think that's far-fetched. I don't think there's any world that the SEC and the Big 10 would approve a college football playoff expansion that doesn't have, 3 to 4 automatic qualifiers for those 2 respective leagues. Again, they've kind of been leading the charge here in that regard, and I don't necessarily see that happening. One coach just said, hey, why don't we keep it simple? Why don't we keep it simple in terms of, let me try to find this. Why don't we keep it simple in terms of making the college football playoff what it is? And that should be the 16 best teams. The 16 best teams, and that would be, you would rank all these teams, and then the seeding would go off those rankings. And that was Lane Kiffin that kind of came up with that. Lane Kiffin kind of came up with that and said that in the SEC spring meetings this past weekend. What that would have looked like this past year if you don't have any of the 5 highest conference champions, getting all that, and getting first round buys and all that. Remember, they've changed that so far to where you're going to seed them 1 through 12, for this upcoming year, and that's how the seeding is going to go. But if you did that thought process last year of just taking the 16th highest ranked teams and seeding that for a 16-team college football playoff, it would have looked like this with these matchups. 16 seed Clemson, remember Clemson, the ACC champion, but it was way back of the pack because it won the conference championship game. 16 seed Clemson would be on the road at number 1 Oregon. 9th seeded Boise State, instead of getting a first-round bye, would be at 8th seeded Indiana. Number 12 seed Arizona State, instead of getting a first-round bye, would be at number 5 Notre Dame. So again, these first couple of games already showing the differences in this model compared to what we saw last year. Number 13 seed Miami would be in the field, and it would be at number 4 Penn State. Number 14 Ole Miss would be in the field. It would be at number 3 Texas. Number 11 Alabama would be in the field. ESPN rejoices, and they would play at number 6 Ohio State. Just like in the reseeding, for what's going to be coming this season with the 12-team college football playoff, as we applied that to what happened last year, we discussed that on the show a couple of days ago, what could have been a home playoff game. Under this simulation as well, it would be number 10 SMU at number 7 Tennessee. So Tennessee would get a home playoff game if they just ranked and seeded the top 16 teams for the college football playoff field last year. Number 15, the final game here, number 15 seed South Carolina would have made the field under this simulation, and the Gamecocks would be at number 2 Georgia. So again, that's kind of simple. Keep it simple, stupid. That makes the most sense to me, right? I mean, if you're in the SEC, okay, chances are you're going to be ranked super high because your strength of schedule is going to be high. Plus, you're going to have more opportunities for some quality wins, okay? So really, if you have a 16-team field, what's the need for 4 automatic qualifiers would be my argument if I'm playing devil's advocate here. What's the need for 4 automatic qualifiers? Because chances are, if you're one of the 16 teams, best teams in the country, means you would, for Tennessee's case, you would have beaten an Alabama on the road. You would have beaten a Florida at home. You would have won a big non-conference game against Oklahoma towards the beginning of the season last year. This season, you could go to the Swamp on the road and beat Florida. That would put you in position to be one of the top 16 teams in the country. So Lane Kiffin, of all people, suggested just, hey, take the top 16 teams, seed them, or rank them that way, seed them accordingly, and let's go play ball. I like that. I really, really do. However, I don't think that that's going to happen, nor do I think the 5+11 model of 5 highest conference champions plus 11 at large is going to matter, because I think it all depends on, the hangups here are the automatic qualifiers for the SEC and the Big Ten, which of course they want 4 each, and then 2 each for the ACC and the Big 12. So that's on the table. Plenty of college football playoff conversation is on the table. Greg Sankey, the FBS commissioners, and Notre Dame's athletic director, they need to determine a playoff format for 2026 and beyond by December the 1st. December the 1st is that cutoff right now. So they got a couple of months, but again, you got to get everybody on the same page. So that's going on. That's been discussed at the SEC spring meetings. There's been questions about that. Another thing would be the 8 or 9 conference schedule for the SEC. Again, I don't see that ever getting done until we get some finality, until we get some in writing. This is the plan for the college football playoff for 2026 and beyond. I don't see the 8 or 9 game discussion in the Southeastern Conference scheduling coming to fruition until the college football playoff conversation has come and gone. And again, it's all about money. There was that report from The Athletic a couple weeks ago that ESPN's willing to pay $60 to $80 million more for that 9th conference schedule, or that 9th game in the conference schedule. If it's more towards the $80 million, I mean, you'd be silly not to take that. Again, it's more money dispersed to your member institutions for a rev share that's coming, and it's an arms race to go out and get the best players, and you can legally pay players to do just that. And so that would be silly right now to not do that. Again, you guys know my thoughts on this. You claim you're the best. It just means more. Play a 9th conference game, because the Big Ten doesn't. And if you play a 9th conference game, well, especially in the era of college football playoff expansion, you're not hurting yourself. You're expanding from 12 to 14, probably from 12 to 16 teams no matter what. So you're not hurting yourself. Of course, that is always my 2 cents. That's what I think about this. I know plenty will disagree. Another interesting caveat to this whole thing is conference championship weekend. What will the FBS programs do with conference championships? What will the SEC do with conference championship? Very unique, interesting kind of play-in type tournament. Not tournament, but play-in rounds, play-in games that I think would be so much fun for college football fans. We're going to discuss that here in the moment when we return right here on Locked On Vols. Plenty to discuss from the SEC spring meetings, the highlights so far. We'll continue this discussion on the other side right here on Locked On Vols. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on all the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Not just the NBA playoffs right now. There's Major League Baseball going on. Right now, as always, college baseball, postseason beginning. College World Series odds have been updated over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. Tennessee went from number 3 to the 6th best odds to win the College World Series this year, courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. You got futures and more. All that over at FanDuel Sportsbook. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head on over to FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Not bad, right? FanDuel.com, or check it out. Download the safe, secure, easy-to-use app. Place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So college football playoff talk, expansion, seeding, rankings, that's really kind of dominated the SEC spring meetings so far. We'll get into some other topics and who said what and kind of what's being discussed in Destin here in just a moment. But kind of on that note, in terms of college football playoff rankings and berths and expansion and all that, an interesting idea is being floated around there as well. Could the top 2 finishers in the SEC and the Big Ten, okay, in the regular season, sit out of championship weekend, meaning they've locked up their spot in the CFP, they're in the bracket, they're ready to roll, while the number 3 team plays the number 6 team, and while the number 4 team plays the number 5 team with a college football playoff berths on the line. Essentially, you are starting the college football playoffs a week earlier. For some of these teams, they're starting the college football playoffs in mid-October, in 1st of November, because they got to just keep on winning. That would be so much fun for the average college football fan to turn on the TV, conference championship weekend, have a doubleheader, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. The winner gets the last 2 spots in the dance for the SEC and the Big Ten. Of course, this is working under the theory of 4 automatic qualifiers. Would be interesting. Would be a ton of money to be made, and would be great television. Now, if you're one of those teams that is ranked 3rd or 4th in your respected conference, whether that's the SEC or the Big Ten, you're probably not a fan of this. Because, Tennessee, was the 3rd SEC team that got in the dance last year. Under this simulation, Tennessee would have to play the 6th-ranked team, which I guess would have been, South Carolina? One of Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, would have to play that team in order to punch its ticket to the college football playoff. So if I'm a team of 3 through, specifically 3 and 4, maybe 3, 4, 5, but 3 and 4, because, again, we're working on the theory of 4 automatic qualifiers, I'm probably not a fan of this. However, if I'm a college football fan, if my team in the SEC is not very good, I am all for it because it's more football, there's stuff on the line, and it's essentially a playoff game, leading into the playoff game. I think it'd be a whole lot of fun. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but boy, would that be fun. That would be a blast. I'm for the top 3 seeds are good. Playing for that 4th seed, if there's not a clear-cut number 4 team in the league, then 4 and 5 or 4 and 4 or whatever play for that last spot. I'd be kind of for that for sure. And under this simulation last year, that would have been Ole Miss, Alabama, or whatever it is. Tennessee would have been safe. So I think that's interesting as well. That's kind of being talked about a little bit at the SEC spring meetings. Now, another topic of conversation at the SEC spring meetings: transfer portal windows. The SEC almost universally wants one window, wants it to be in January. Kirby Smart talked about it on Tuesday, talking about the need for eliminating the 2 windows because you need your roster to be set heading into spring practice. Josh Heupel not doing media in the SEC spring meetings this week, not talking. He might do an interview with, I'm sure, the sports animals down there, Jimmy Himes, and he might do some local stuff, but overall, he's not doing any national stuff, but he agrees with Kirby Smart. He said it pretty much after the spring game. If you go back to that quote, this was after the spring game. Quote, "I think the culture piece is extremely important, in particular at this time of the year, because there's not a lot of time with them before you get to training camp. So it's got to be mature guys that you're bringing into your program too. Talked about the need for having your roster set heading into spring ball, heading into spring workouts to set your culture, find your leadership, kind of find the nucleus of your team. That was Josh Heupel, of course, after the spring game, the orange and white game, along with all the Nico Iamaleava drama and everything. So the SEC almost universally, Greg Sankey, said the preference of the league is one window. They're fighting for that. Ohio State's athletic director, said May makes the most sense, referencing the fiscal year in terms of, June or July 1st or whatever it is when everything turns over for revenue sharing as well. I think a May transfer portal window is the stupidest idea in the world, especially if that's the only one. Like, are you kidding me? What a dumb idea. I don't think that'll ever happen. But of course, transfer portal windows, coaches more than anything want the elimination of the spring transfer portal window because obviously it can come back and bite you just like it bit Tennessee, losing its starting quarterback. Another thing that I thought was pretty noteworthy from, I think this was Tuesday down in Destin, and in one of his, I think it was his post-Tuesday wrap-up press conference or whatever, Greg Sankey said this. He said, quote, I've shared with the decision-making working group that I have people in my room, he said, I shared with the decision-making working group that I have people in my room asking, why are we still in the NCAA? Why are we still in the NCAA? I thought that kind of flew under the radar a little bit. I mean, he said, I've got people asking me, the conference commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, arguably the most powerful man in all of sports, in college sports, asking me, hey, commish, hey, Greg, why are we still in the SEC? Or why are we still in the NCAA? Makes no sense. Makes no sense. Well, that kind of coincides with what Danny White said last week in a video put out by Chancellor Don DePlowman, saying, I don't care, we got cameras here. The only answer to this is collective bargaining. The only answer to this is collective bargaining. What's that mean? Pretty much, why are you in the NCAA? Collective bargaining, where you can make them employees. You can pay them a salary. They have opportunities for name, image, and likeness. They can form their own unions, okay? So if you have all that, then there's no need for an NCAA. So I thought that was really, really interesting that Greg Sankey said, I've got people asking me, why are we still in the NCAA? This continues to fuel flame, fuel the flame, fuel the fire that football can break away from the NCAA. What's that look like as well? Could football, the big power level, or at least the SEC and the Big Ten, break away from the NCAA, do its own football thing? Because remember, the college football playoff is not associated with the NCAA. The NCAA does not generate revenue from that. The NCAA generates its revenue every single year from March Madness tournament, the NCAA basketball tournament. That is what it makes its money off of. The NCAA is not a part of the college football playoffs. So could the Power Four or the Big Ten and the SEC split, do its own thing, have its own rules for football every single year, while basketball continues to play in the NCAA tournament, baseball, softball, all that and more? I think the answer is yes. I mean, that's been discussed year after year after year. How close are we to doing that? I don't know. We're closer now than ever when you have arguably, the most powerful man in college sports saying, I've got people asking me why we're still a part of the NCAA. Makes no sense. So I thought that quote on Tuesday was very, very interesting. Not a whole lot of people have written about it. Not a whole lot of people have talked about it. But maybe at least as the week goes on, maybe that'll continue to gain traction. And finally here, before we shift into some baseball talk for the Knoxville Regional, some storylines that even if you're not a huge baseball fan, I think you'll find interesting, so stick around. As of right now, there's been no talk of the Tennessee law that was passed a couple of weeks ago that essentially prohibits the house settlement. Essentially protects the university and universities in Tennessee, Memphis, Vanderbilt, whoever, from athletes suing university over denied NIL rights or whatever. Of course, you got the college commission that's trying to get all these Power Four conferences and the Power Four teams and programs, universities to sign off saying, here's the cap, here's what we can do. They can't make more than this and all this. If that were in effect, athletes could sue the university. This law protects Tennessee and other universities in the state from that. Essentially, they're calling it the most friendly NIL state there is, the state of Tennessee. The SEC said potentially they could boot Tennessee and Vanderbilt out of the conference. That's not going to happen. Tennessee is a founding member. Sewanee's not taking Tennessee's spot. Georgia Tech's not taking Tennessee's spot. The SEC can't afford to lose Tennessee all things encompassing, women's basketball, men's basketball, baseball, softball, football, all that and more. I don't think it's ever going to get to that point, but this is kind of interesting. I thought this would be a big topic of conversation because what other states are going to follow? New Jersey's following right now. Could other states in the Southeast start following and make this a bigger deal? I don't know. We'll see. But essentially, the College Sports Commission, or whatever it's called, this law in Tennessee wipes that out. Protects the university. The university can go on and do whatever it wants to do. The commission doesn't like that. I'm sure Greg Sankey doesn't like that. The NCAA doesn't like that. But there's not been a whole lot of talk about that this week, at least at the time of this recording. I found that pretty wild indeed. So, obviously, a lot going on in the SEC spring meetings in Destin, Florida this week. Will anything come to fruition? Will we have a college football playoff expansion final conclusion by the end of SEC spring meetings? No, because, of course, it's not just the SEC. Big Ten's got a heavy say in this as well as some of the other conference commissioners. Will we have an 8 or 9 game conference league slate finality conclusion? No, because all that's going to be going off the CFP. And again, like Josh Ward said the other day, we've been talking about this for years and years and years and years. Will there be some finality to the NCAA transfer portal window? I think the SEC's already kind of unified in what it wants, but what does the NCAA have to say? They're begging the NCAA to do that. Help us help you, right? A lot of conversations going on, but I don't think a lot's going to get done. As wild as that is, a lot of conversations, a lot of stories, a lot of interview clips, but what's getting done down there in terms of things actually finding conclusions? I don't think a lot in that regard is going to happen this week, but nonetheless, it is football content here at the end of the month of May, and I am very appreciative of that. 5 storylines for the Knoxville Regional and why even the most casual baseball fan will find these interesting. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Vols. So the Knoxville Regional gets going on Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, streaming on ESPN+. You've got Wake Forest, the 2 seed, playing Cincinnati, the 3 seed. Later that evening at 6 o'clock, you've got the 1 seed, Tennessee, 14th overall seed in the field, national seed, hosting Miami of Ohio, who's the 4th seed in the Knoxville Regional. That game's at 6 o'clock on ESPN+. Right now, those are the streaming designations. Probably later in the weekend, Tennessee, especially Tennessee's games, they're going to be on national television. They got a pretty good crew there this week for sure. So broadcasting crew. So that tells me that that's probably going to be the plan. But nonetheless, postseason baseball, we'll see what happens. The winner of this regional takes on the winner of the Fayetteville Regional with host Arkansas. So we'll see what happens in that regard. But here are some 5 storylines. I'm not necessarily going in on a deep dive into every single team, but some storylines that I found pretty interesting heading into the week. Number 1, the Griffin Merritt dilemma. Griffin Merritt, he hadn't been on the team in 2 years. He's been gone for a little bit. Who's Griffin Merritt? Well, he was the designated hitter for Tennessee on the 2023 College World Series team. Why am I bringing Griffin Merritt up right now when he's been gone for 2 years? Well, I'll tell you. Number 1, Griffin Merritt, born and raised in Cincinnati, lives there right now. Number 2, played for the Bearcats for his first 4 years in college before transferring down to Tennessee for his final year of eligibility in 2023. Number 3, graduated from Cincinnati. Number 4, his brother played and graduated from Cincinnati. So there's very much a allegiance split situation for Griffin Merritt this weekend. He's going to be in town. He's coming back to Lindsey Nelson Stadium. Let's not forget all that he contributed to Tennessee. I believe he led the Vols in home runs that year with 18. I believe, maybe I'm wrong, or at least at one time he was leading Tennessee with home runs that year. He was the designated hitter. He had a great outfield assist in extra innings against Vanderbilt in that game that turned the whole season around. He walked it off against Vanderbilt, kind of sparking that win against the Commodores that really changed the entire season around. He had a great series against Southern Miss in the Supers. He was a part of the all-regional team, the all-Clemson regional team when Tennessee won that regional as a 2 seed. He had a great year for Tennessee. Really, really good year. He's going to be in town this weekend, but he is also going to be, it's not a guarantee that he's going to be rooting for Tennessee in every single game. If Tennessee plays Cincinnati, it's going to be tough for Griffin Merritt, but I found that pretty interesting for sure. Hoping to catch up with Griffin Merritt later this week and have a story on that over at volquest.com. Matthew Dallas returns. Probably saying, who's Matthew Dallas? If you follow Tennessee baseball closely, you know exactly who that is. One of the highest-rated signees 2 cycles ago for the University of Tennessee. And he was a true freshman last year in 2024. Got a couple of opportunities. He and Derek Schaefer both pitched in that Oklahoma game in the extra innings in Arlington to kick off the season. So, I mean, they were put in high-leverage situations from the get-go. Matthew Dallas had a couple of starts as well, but overall, 17 innings, 4.76 ERA, 15 appearances, 2 starts. He didn't play a major role for Tennessee last year. So he did not compete in a postseason game, or at least in the NCAA tournament postseason game. He was not on the roster in Omaha, left via the transfer portal, landed at Wake Forest. Finished the year for the Demon Deacons as the number 2 weekend starter. 4-1's the record, 5.09 ERA, 13 starts, 53 innings pitched, 59 strikeouts, 28 walks. So the numbers aren't that good, but he is one of their starting pitchers, and potentially, depending on how it shakes out, if Wake beats Cincinnati, I would assume Wake is going to throw their number 1 guy on Friday night to ensure you get that win. If Tennessee plays Wake, there's a chance that Matthew Dallas is on the mound to start against the Vols, his former team, in a stadium that he once called home. I think that's pretty interesting. Number 3, Josh Reynolds against his former team. Who's Josh Reynolds? Well, Josh Reynolds is the current Tennessee Director of Baseball Operation and Pitching Performance. He is the former Cincinnati pitching coach. Tony Vitello hired him away from Cincinnati last summer, and he's coming over to, again, this coaching staff for Tennessee, one of the best in the country. He is a support staffer, but a former Power 4 pitching coach is on your staff as a support staffer. That's not bad. While at Cincinnati, they're in the 2024 season. That's the only season they spent there. He helped Cincinnati reach its first 30-win season since 2019, finished 5th in the Big 12 after being voted to finish last in the preseason rankings. Reynolds was instrumental in helping all Big 12 hurlers Christian Mitchell and Nathan Taylor. The staff overall at Cincinnati, whenever Reynolds was overseeing it, boasted an ERA of 5.89, which is not great, but that's the lowest for the program since 2019 and nearly a full run lower than where it was in 2023. So he did some good work at Cincinnati. Of course, he's here at Tennessee. Potentially, Tennessee could square off against Cincinnati at some point this weekend, and Josh Reynolds, support staffer for the Vols, used to be the pitching coach for Cincinnati. Speaking of Cincinnati, another storyline, Cincinnati loves to run. Tied for 18th in the country with 128 stolen bases. Cincinnati's been caught stealing just 14 times this year. Tennessee, of course, we know this. If you watch Tennessee baseball, you know that's a struggle with Tennessee at points in times controlling the run game. So if Tennessee and Cincinnati square off, you know Cincinnati's going to be running just like Vanderbilt was. Get on first, run, depending on who it is. Get on first, run. They're going to be testing that theory for sure. 5 players have recorded over 10 stolen bases for the Bearcats. Their leadoff man has been 37 of 38 on the year stealing bases. Their shortstop has stolen 19 bases. Their star player, Carrington Cross, has stolen 15 bases. Another guy's stolen 11 bases, and then there's another guy stole 10 bases, and then another guy has stolen 9 bases. So nearly 6 players who have racked up over 10 steals. But that 37 of 38 is pretty incredible. So that's something to look out for sure, especially if Marcus Phillips is pitching in that game, because that has been specifically a hardship for him. He's worked through it a little bit, looked better of late, but that is something to pay attention to for sure. And then finally, my last storyline for the Knoxville Regional, again, not trying to go into an in-depth preview of each team, but some notables at the top. Wake Forest, good offensive team. Wake Forest, a bad defensive team. Okay? Wake Forest ranks dead last in the ACC with a team fielding percentage of .963. Wake Forest committed an ACC high 71 errors, allowed nearly 90% of base stealers to swipe their intended bag. Okay, the left side of that infield for the Demon Deacons has been particularly problematic. Shortstop Merritt Houston has committed 11 errors. Third baseman Cade Lewis has committed 10 errors. Infielder Dalton Waltz, who also is the DH at times, he's committed 9 errors. Okay, so Wake Forest, not a very good fielding team. Compare that to Tennessee, who's not the best fielding team in its own right. The Volunteers rank 15th in the SEC with a .969 fielding percentage. So a couple ticks higher, but still not great. Cincinnati fields the best in the region with a 9.78 clip, while Miami, Ohio has a fielding percentage of .974. So Wake Forest, sloppy in the field. Cincinnati, aggressive on the base paths. Josh Reynolds, Tennessee staffer, former pitching coach for Cincinnati. Matthew Dallas, number 2 starter for Wake Forest, played at Tennessee his true freshman season last year. And then Griffin Merritt, one of the heroes for the 2023 World Series team for Tennessee. Started his career and played 4 seasons at Cincinnati. He's from Cincinnati, and if Tennessee plays Cincinnati, it is going to be a dilemma for him. Those are my 5 top storylines heading into the weekend for the Knoxville Regional. All right, fun show today. Appreciate you guys for being here, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day, every dayers. Could not do this show without you. I'm really, really looking forward to coming back tomorrow, getting you setting the table again, everything you need to know about the Knoxville Regional and whatever else is happening down in Destin, Florida for the SEC spring meetings. Tennessee football as well, entering the next phase of the offseason with summer workouts. Appreciate you guys as always. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. This is Locked On Vols.